On today's episode of Ready for Retirement, I am joined by Derek. Derek opens up about two serious health events that he and his wife faced transitioning into retirement. He opens up about his concern that he wouldn't feel challenged when he retired, and he talks about a conversation that he and his wife had that made that transition so much better, so much so that they're in a place today that he never imagined was possible. It's all coming up on today's episode of Ready for Retirement. Joining me on today's episode of Ready for Retirement is Derek Tinkey. Derek, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I think you've got a lot. I think everyone has a lot to share. And I'll start with that. I think more so than most people realize. And especially just in having this conversation with you and prepping for this, I think there's some good things that a lot of people will get a lot out of. But to start, Derek, if you don't mind sharing, just what was your career like and when did you make the decision to retire?
Okay, so I've been in law enforcement for a little over 34 years. I had 14 years or about 13 and a half years local law enforcement, and then the balance, the 20 plus almost 21 years was federal law enforcement. When I was doing local law enforcement, we actually had a good pay scale, but our retirement wasn't that great. And I started noticing a lot of the older employees and officers that were having to work much longer because they couldn't afford life insurance or medical insurance when they retired. And we started looking back forth. Stephanie and I were talking, and we're like, this isn't good because we're going to have to work much longer until we get to 65. So we decided to keep our eyes open for something different. And so that's when I joined on federal law enforcement, which would then give us medical insurance when we retire and a better employee compensation as far as their thrift savings plan, which is kind of like a company IRA, but for the government. So yeah, we made the move over there. It was a little bit scary because I loved what I did before, but we did it and we've been blessed.
Yeah. How old were you when you made that change to the federal side, and how old were you when you retired from that?
So I was 39 years old, which is 2 years older than what's normally allowable in federal service. Normally for law enforcement, you have to enter at 37. There was an exception at that time for that year, and I got in under that exception. So I was able to put in my 20 plus years, and I had to retire at 60. So with the exemption, normally on federal law enforcement, you have to retire at 57, and the exemption allowed me to work till 60.
So 60. And so in your mind, there was no, do I work till 60? Do I work till 65? It was, the decision was made for you, it sounds like.
It was, and the only scary thing was trying to figure out when I got to the end of that road, then do we have enough to actually stay retired, to go into retirement and enjoy life, or do I need to look for something else to, have some income?
Yeah. So in other words, you were retiring, but it didn't necessarily guarantee total peace of mind of you could stay retired. You might
Correct.
need something
Yes.
else.
Yeah.
You mentioned health insurance, and that was one of the reasons to the switch to the federal side.
Right.
Obviously, health insurance is important for everyone, but you were sharing a story with me of especially why that's important for you and Stephanie. Do you mind sharing why that was such an important piece of the puzzle for you?
Absolutely. My parents, they worked uh, many jobs throughout their life, and they saved and built a nest egg for retirement. As they approached their later years, my dad came down with cancer 3 different times over a 16-year period. During that time period, the first two bouts of cancer, they had an insurance policy that covered it. And so they didn't have that big of a financial impact on his. After the second round of cancer treatment, then that insurance company went bankrupt. They couldn't get insurance anywhere else because of his existing condition. And so then when the third round of cancer hit, it basically depleted all of their financial reserves. Then he ended up passing at the end of it. And so my mom was left having to take a second mortgage out on the home and then just live on an extremely tight budget. It was difficult to watch her go through it. She's a strong woman, but it's still tough to see that happen. And I didn't want that to happen to Stephanie and myself, and wanted to make sure there was some sort of a safety net there.
How old were you when your parents were going through that?
The first bout of cancer happened almost 34 years ago, around 34 years.
Hmm.
Then he passed away, it would be in 2003.
Hmm.
So that's when he finally passed.
So you had retirement wasn't yet on the horizon as this was happening, but it was something that was definitely in the back of your mind. How or maybe in the front of your mind, how much so was that part of your thinking as you were preparing for retirement or the transition to the federal side of things, or do you need to work again even once retiring from that? Can you walk us through that?
Sure. It was huge in our decisions. When I started working on local law enforcement, the pay was good, but I didn't realize that we weren't going to get any medical in retirement. And I didn't understand the consequences of that. As they started going through the different treatments, we started looking at it and it just it didn't make sense. Matter of fact, I loved where I worked. I even talked to him before I left. I mean, the whole reason that I was leaving was for the medical benefits and the different employee contributions that they have towards the retirement plan.
What did you do? So when you retired from the federal law enforcement, was health insurance 100% covered? Was it partially covered? What did your plan look like at that point?
The way it is for federal employees is when you retire, we pay the same amount that a any other current federal employee pays for their insurance. Now
Hmm.
you do have there's quite a few plans you can choose from. So it's up to you kind of where you choose your plan. We've got one that is a little bit more expensive, but it covers more.
Hmm.
And every year we can decide to go to a different plan, just as if we're a current federal employee.
Hmm. And how has your health been since retiring? And if you don't, maybe for you and Stephanie, if you don't mind
Oh,
sharing what
oh,
that's looked
sure.
like.
Be happy to. Overall, physically, I'm still strong. I go to the gym. I work out 2 to 4 days a week, usually 1 to 2 hours per workout, keeping my cardio up. The challenge that we had is I retired at the end of May of 2023. In August, Stephanie had to go in and have ankle surgery. She had torn her peroneal tendon and basically destroyed a ligament in her foot, her ankle. So they do reconstruction on that. She went into surgery, and about that time, I got a call from my urologist. We've been doing active surveillance on the prostate cancer that I have, and they had some things that were concerning to them. So they were wanting to do some more tests, and so I had to go back in. So when they made that call, then I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to tell Stephanie when she comes out of surgery. She came through surgery about 4 hours later, got her home, and then I broke the news to her, said, "Hey, just so you're not worrying, I don't want to blindside you, but I got this call." So, anyways, that was a little concerning for her. She was a little frustrated that she even had surgery, even though she needed it. She was a little frustrated because now she feels like she can't be there for me. So, anyways, our daughter, Caitlin, she came, she got me and Stephanie, she dropped me off for some of my testing. Then she took Stephanie over for one of her follow-up visits. And so there's one of those things where you start feeling, okay, I'm feeling a little bit older now because, you know, our child's having to come down and help take care of us and take us to appointments. Anyways, they did the testing, got the results back. So things are staying on course. We're still doing active surveillance on the prostate cancer. And so going every 6 months for more tests and then occasional MRIs and biopsies. Yeah, that's one thing. It's there, but we're monitoring it and making the most of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Derek. In as a follow-up to all that, how has your perspective, if at all, changed, both regarding your decision to retire last year as well as how you view retirement today?
It gives you a different viewpoint for sure. You don't know how much time you have to live. And again, somebody could step out in front of a car or be driving down the road and get hit and die. But whenever you hear that, the word cancer or anything like that, you start worrying about how long is my timeline? If it comes back, what will the impact be? So our focus is really looking at enjoying life together and do new adventures, be there for each other. That's again part of why I make sure and continue to work out every week because if it happens to come around, I want to have the best chance I can have to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To put it bluntly, absolutely. What does that look like for you and Stephanie? I know part of retirement you haven't been able to do as much, whether it's because of Stephanie healing or you, but what have you done? What have you done that maybe you would not have done had it not been for some of the health stuff that you both have gone through?
Hmm. I think as far as if I didn't know about anything, we didn't go through any of the medical stuff, we would go travel, but I don't think we would appreciate it as much as what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it gave us both a better perspective. We like to go hiking and camping and kayaking and all that, so we're pretty active.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was hitting us on two sides because of her ankle stability, and worried, how's that going to come back, as well as if the prostate cancer comes back, or if it, gets where it's more aggressive, then what do we do? So I think it's for us to really treasure each thing, and we're being starting this year to be more focused on planning trips. And so it looks like next year we should have a lot of good trips coming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. I know so much of your transition into retirement. This has been the focus. It's one of those things where if you don't have your health, nothing else really seems to matter. And so you've been so acutely focused on health right now. How has that impacted how the transition into retirement gone? Meaning, has that made it easier to say, okay, we don't have to fill our time with work, or we don't feel that sense of loss of purpose because this has become our purpose? How has the transition overall been for the two of you?
I think you're right that there was some of that normal void was probably filled by taking care of her and her, making sure that I'm going to my visits. And so I think initially that was kind of a distraction, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we're back on track, I think the main thing is really looking at being intentional of what we do. Whether it's we see somebody in line at the grocery store and you can tell that they're, you know, searching for the money to pay for the groceries, and we step up and say, "Hey, we got it." Ask me, "Is it okay if we do this?" So we're doing, making sure and being intentional with acts of kindness, and also looking at what do we want out of life.
How much of that question, of what do we want out of life, has been asked post cancer diagnosis, post surgeries, and how much of it was asked prior to any of that happening?
I think a lot more was asked after the diagnosis. I was always aware of it because of my father. So that was something that you think about. But when it hits you, it gives you a whole different perspective. And I think that's coupled with before I retired, we took a camping trip, and we went all the way up into Maine through Vermont and Maine. And we stopped by Niagara Falls. And while we were there, I looked over and Stephanie was all teared up. We were right near the edge of the waterfalls. And I was like, what's wrong? You okay? And she looked at me and she goes, I never thought I'd get to see this. At that point, I thought, there's a lot that I want her to see and experience as well as myself. But that's something that I didn't know that she had in the back of her mind. But I'm so glad that we went there. With that, that's why we want to do a bunch of road trips. I want to let her experience, and I want to experience it with her, all these beautiful things that are, throughout the country.
Yes, a certainly new appreciation for what is out there and what can we do, and the nothing like a cancer diagnosis or a serious health event to bring that into perspective. On the
Mhm.
financial side, because you shared the story about your parents, and the story being, yes, health is a thing and it's nothing that's guaranteed to any of us, but the follow-up to that is the financial implications of after your dad passed and after that insurance company went bankrupt and wasn't able to pay for that, the consequences for your mom and seeing what she went through, and you not wanting to put your wife through anything like that or have anything to worry like that. What financial concerns did you have going into retirement, and have those concerns materialized? I know it's still just over a year in, but what concerns did you have, and to what extent have they been realized?
Yeah, I think for us, we didn't want, and again, when I say this, my mom was not a burden. on us at all. And it was a pleasure and an honor to actually be able to be there for her, to take care of her and be there in her last moments. On the financial aspect of it, it was that we didn't want it to be a burden on our kids in any way. And we wanted to make sure that if something happens to me, Stephanie doesn't have to move out of the house, away from the property. She can continue a good life. And again, just financial, because I know we've been married 38 years now. And so the emotional toll would be there for us, if whenever one of the other passes away. But financially, I don't want to add any other burden on top of her. With that, while I was working, we probably lived on about 48% of our income. Then we invested the rest. And then basically at the end of it, we're going to be able to live and enjoy life. And she's fine if I pass away as far as financially. And still, then whenever she passes, then, the kids will be fine as well. We've worked it out, put safeguards in there, I guess, as Ari says, put up the bumper pads on the lanes.
Yep.
And so I think we feel comfortable with where we're at.
Yeah. What has been, health events aside, the transition into retirement, a year plus into it, what has been the biggest challenge for the two of you?
This is not anything negative. It is, you do have to be aware of the increased time with each other. And that's something that going into it, you hear horror stories about people that they retire, the kids are gone. And next thing you turn around that they're divorced and they've gone separate ways. And we didn't want that. When I retired, before I retired, we actually started talking about what does this look like when I'm home now? Because I had a hour and 15-minute commute each way to work. So you're looking at 9, 10-hour days, almost 50 more hours a week that I'm right there. So I really wanted to make sure that I was respectful of her space and I didn't take away from things that she normally would do. We just didn't want any friction. So we talked about it a lot beforehand. And then even during, she's like, hey, okay, I normally do it this way. So if you'll just give me some space, I'm like, okay. And I
Yeah.
hand it over and she does her thing. So I guess it's being respectful of each other and then avoiding idle time. Shortly after retiring, it's weird because you're not getting up and going to work. And then you start saying, okay, I guess I should relax maybe a little bit. So you relax. You're like, well, I don't feel productive. So then I started doing checklists. I'd make a list of things to do. Like Stephanie and I talked, I'd pick like 3 things to make sure and do. And then I get those done and then I can do whatever else extra. So I think it's big on staying task oriented on things, at least for me. And instead of getting up at 4:30 in the morning to go to work, I get up at 7 every morning. So that way I stay consistent.
Hmm. Hmm. I like what you said about you and Stephanie having the conversation. What is it going to look like when I don't have 50 plus hours of my week accounted for? What did you learn about each other, or what was a surprise that came out of that conversation that you guys had?
Because she was really worried that I would be very down or not feel challenged by not going to work. Because for 38 years, or no, for 34 years, been on call most of that time. So whether it's, getting called out or whether it's somebody calling us something, there's some activity going on. When we came home, she was really, really worried about how I would take it as far as if I'd be lonely, missing everything. And for me, it took our relationship to a whole nother level.
Hmm.
Where initially I was kind of concerned about, getting in her way and cause problems. But tell you what, it's allowed me to learn more about her and to find things that make her happy, things that she definitely wants to do on her own, and just really getting along, living life so much better. It's just, I'm amazed at how much better it is than what I had imagined.
How did I'm curious about that because I think a lot of people say, yeah, it's there's the fear of what does this do to my relationship with my spouse when I am home, but there's also the aspiration of, yeah, I do want to retire and have my marriage thrive.
Yes.
What was it? Was there a moment or something that happened where you realized, wow, this isn't just me not getting in the way of Stephanie, but we're able to actually reconnect in a way we haven't been able to?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna give Stephanie a ton of credit on this one because she really was focused on, hey, why don't you go to lunch with one of your guy work, friends, that you worked with. She was really encouraging me to stay engaged with others and to let me know that it's okay if I want to go do something on my own, whether to go fishing or whatever I want to do. She was very encouraging. And I think she was a huge positive in this. Yes.
Hmm. And so her being encouraging of you continuing to do some of these things led to a stronger relationship between the two of you.
Yes. Yeah. And it did. And, in talking about it, and I think that's a big thing. My wife is a very good communicator. She likes to talk. I'm more on the silent side. And what we found is that the communication is so much better back and forth now. And I'm talking a lot more to her. And she's even talking about the same, but it's interacting. She likes to talk, and that's her form of love and communication. And now I've got the opportunity to really embrace that and grow in it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How would you, for someone who's listening, saying I want to do that. I want to have that conversation with my spouse. It can be hard sometimes to bring it up or hard to acknowledge the fact that this might actually be a challenge in retirement as opposed to a pure positive in retirement.
Mhm.
Was it difficult to have that conversation initially, or did it flow fairly easily?
It was difficult for me just because, again, being more the silent one, then I would try to anticipate what I thought she was needing or wanting. And then as I listened to her more and then began to open up in a different way of what are my concerns and my fears, I think that really changed it because, instead of going into it as a strong man that, hey, this is the way it should go here and here, I think this, I opened up and started being very vulnerable to her as far as what are my concerns, what do I want out of things? And I think that allowed us to grow.
What would you say, to the extent that you feel comfortable sharing, what was it that you wanted most out of your retirement that you shared with Stephanie?
For me, and again, I wanted to make our life in retirement fun and enjoyable, to see new things and experience things in a different manner. There's been, again, 34 years in law enforcement. I mean, from being when we're opening up Christmas presents on Christmas Day and they get paged out on a SWAT call out, and it's here you go, you drop it, or I get phone calls that interrupt things.
Yeah.
Um, I was looking forward to uninterrupted time with her, and especially after seeing her response in Niagara Falls, I wanted to really nurture that and see more.
Well, I think that there is so much, as simple as that is, I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that too, of preparing for retirement with the backdrop of what you saw your parents go through and wanting to make sure that you were prepared. Going into retirement and having health events that really bring into immediate perspective how precious life is and how none of us are guaranteed anything, to the tactical things of how do you have these conversations with your spouse? How do you have kind of a goal for retirement to make it one of adventure and get the most out of life that you can? If you could give one piece of advice to people who are preparing for retirement, not so much
Mhm.
on the financial side, I think there's enough there, but on the psychological side or the emotional side, if you could give advice to them to best prepare for this season, to make it the best season of their life, what would you tell them?
I think probably to be open emotionally to each other, talking about your fears, your concerns, and what does it mean? What brings you joy, and what are some items in life that you haven't been able to do, and then try to make those happen. Because I look at it as with this, it's almost like a fresh start. Worked all this time. Now let's look at starting something new,
Hmm.
and let's grow from here and do new experiences. So I think just a really good conversation with, your spouse, partner is big because it impacts both. And, whatever the decision is can make it, whether it's a good retirement or bad retirement, I think. You don't want to just sit around and argue or veg and just watch shows and then die. there's too much out there to do.
Yeah. On that note, what's next for you and Stephanie as you look at your retirement journey?
Well, I've been doing a lot of watching on YouTube and talking with other friends that are skilled more in construction. So I'd like to build us a new workshop, and then we're going to get a new tow vehicle for our camper, and then we want to do a trip up into Canada and up into Alaska.
Wow.
So on that, we're looking to probably be gone anywhere, I guess maybe 2 to 3 months, however long it takes us. What we'd like to do is just take off, and then at whatever point we need to turn around and come back because we're done, and that's what we do.
That sounds like an adventure. And I
So
look forward to hearing how that goes. That's great. Well, Derek, thank you very much just for sharing this. I know that this isn't a conversation that a lot of people have sometimes of what's on the other side. What do I need to do to make the most of it? How do I talk to my spouse? How do I prepare psychologically? So I appreciate you sharing health stuff, family stuff, your concerns, your hopes. This has been great. Is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with before we wrap up for today?
yeah, I think one thing that probably the most significant thing that we did right off the bat was when we were coming up on retirement, we interviewed 5 different advisors from 5 different companies. Of course, one of them was with Ari, with Root. And my wife had watched a lot of your videos, watched a lot of Ari's videos to get educated. And everybody, they paled in comparison to you and Ari and the whole Root team. I didn't tell you this earlier, but when I retired, I was actually thinking about managing our funds in the TSP and just staying with that and kind of going. Because I was worried whether I'd find anybody that I could trust with our hard-earned savings. And after talking with y'all, man, it brought such a new comfort for us, and we're able to enjoy without stressing about the market. I know that Stephanie's going to be okay because y'all are going to take care of her based on our conversations that we've had. So I know she's going to be in good hands if something happens to me. And I think that's a big thing for anybody that's watching this is find an advisor that fits with them. And you don't just have to get somebody to just manage his money because like y'all do the holistic thing where it's about life and enjoying it.
Yeah.
So, and for me, I'd like to say thank you very much for that. It's been awesome.
Well, thank you, Derek. And you nailed it's about life. Money doesn't mean much without the proper context of what does this life that we're living look like. And the whole team at Root here loves you and Stephanie. I really appreciate you sharing that. So very happy to hear that you are living, you're adventuring, you're making the most out of life with your money. So great to see and appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, on that note, Derek, we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast, and wish you the best with that multi-month road trip to Alaska through Canada. That sounds like an adventure. Maybe we do a follow-up episode at some point to hear how that went and do a
I, th
check-in.
I think it sounds fantastic. And I tell you what, I'm serious as a heart attack. Y'all are life changers. And I've told this to Ari different times. These like easy. If he didn't have parents, we would adopt him. We really love that. We love him. And Hannah, everybody's been great. And yeah, I can't tell you thank you enough because money can come and go, but the one thing that I treasured the most is my wife, and I know that she is going to be taken care of with y'all. So there's a comfort there that can't put a price on.
Well,
So
thank you, Derek.
right.
It's special to hear. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And like I said, we love getting to do what we do with awesome people like yourself and like Stephanie. So appreciate that very much.
You're welcome. Bye.
And on that note, we will wrap. Derek, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Root Financial has not provided any compensation for and has not influenced the content of any testimonials and endorsements shown. Any testimonials and endorsements shown have been invited, have been shared with each individual's permission, and are not necessarily representative of the experience of other clients. To our knowledge, no other conflicts of interest exist regarding these testimonials and endorsements. Once again, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial, and if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients at Root Financial get the most out of life with their money, be sure to visit us at www.rootfinancialpartners.com.